It is Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you by the Atlantic City Airport. Plan your next vacation now. Spirit Airlines is offering nonstop flights from Atlantic City International to Boston, San Juan, Miami, and Atlanta, plus other exciting destinations. Visit spirit.com. Speaking of Atlanta, we're going to go to the South and look at the NFC South. We're going to take a little detour. We were going to go north, but because of the trade yesterday, we're going to go to the South, and Geoff Mosher is pinch hitting today for Andrew DeCecco. And, Jeff, you know this division pretty well. You guys have a lot of contacts from InsideTheBirds.com in that South division. So we're going to do a little detour from the West all the way down South, and we'll take a look at what should be a very interesting division. We've got Tom Brady back. We've got a new quarterback situation in Atlanta, a new quarterback situation in Carolina, and New Orleans should be interesting. So let's take a look at the NFC North. My man, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. I'm good. I'm excited to pinch hit here for Andrew and talk about teams that aren't the Eagles or the NFC East. So
yeah, man.
This will be fun.
Well, he does a great job. You got a lot to you have a big wall to climb over here. All right, actually, I said north. We're going to the south. So let's start with Tom Brady. He's back. So let's start with that. Is Tom Brady back ultimately put them, this offense back at the same level? Or are you kind of wanting to see what level of Tom Brady we're going to get?
No, I think I pretty much know what level of Tom Brady we're going to get. I mean, even if he's, 80% of vintage Tom Brady, he still has some of the best weaponry in the NFL. So it really shouldn't be much of a fall off. In fact, it would have been fascinating more so to see what the Buccaneers would have done going forward if Blaine Gabbert had to be their quarterback, or if maybe Kyle Trask made that huge jump. But Tom Brady should be just fine having guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and Russell Gage has played well for the Mets at certain times, and I know they got a receiver in Jalen Darden that they think can be sneaky good kind of player. The big question is they lost a few guys on the offensive line, but they still have one of the better offensive lines I would imagine in the league. And then of course, at any time, Rob Gronkowski, like 5 days before the season, could come out of retirement and just be a big part of it, which I think a lot of people would not be surprised to see happen. But even so, you've got Cam Brate there, and I don't think they still have O.J. Howard anymore. But
I was going to say, without Gronk, how much of a hit does this offense take? No, they don't have Howard, by the way.
Yeah, obviously Gronk's been a huge safety valve and a weapon for Gronk. For Brady. But again, to me, it only impacts them if they lose a couple of guys to injuries. Godwin, Evans, they've got weapons, man. And Brady just is the best at being able to take a guy you never heard of. Like, remember, like Scotty Miller, right? Who's one of probably their fifth receiver now. He steps in there and he's had big games for them before. So I just imagine Cameron Brate, while he is not Rob Gronkowski, will be a chain mover for them in enough of capacity to make their offense work.
Over on defense, obviously this is a really good defense, kind of underrated too. Shaq Barrett, Vita Vea, Levante David, White. There's Antoine Winfield Jr., Logan Ryan. I mean, there's not a lot of weaknesses on this defense, and I don't know that they get enough, attention.
No, they don't. And, last year, a lot of people forgot how banged up at cornerback they were all year, pulling Richard Sherman, that he gets banged up. But when they're healthy, Jamil Dean, Sean Murphy, Bunting are a pretty good cornerback core, kind of an unheralded one. They don't get a whole lot of write-ups. They don't get a lot of acclaim compared to some of the best corners in the league. But what makes this defense really work and what makes those cornerbacks effective is that Todd Bowles sort of supports them by putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. He's one of the heaviest blitzers in the NFL year after year. Last year, he did a surprising thing, which is he played a lot more zone, Mike, than he normally plays because of their injury situation, but he didn't dial down the blitzing that much. He just blitzed from zone looks, which is pretty rare in the NFL. But if somebody could think of ways to do it, that's Todd Bowles. And so they've got a lot of really good players on the front seven. They did lose Whitehead, who I thought was a good player. Tahir Whitehead, I think, was it? No. It was not. It's not Tahir. It's somebody else. So, Jordan Whitehead, who I thought would have been a good look for the Eagles, but he left in free agency. But they still have a tremendous number of really good players, and they just need to stay healthy.
And the big thing you mentioned there, Bowles is now in. He is the new head coach. So a lot of new head coaches in this division, or two in this division, and both teams finished at the top last year. You had 13-4 Tampa Bay, New Orleans 9-8, and of course they're going to go with Jameis Winston. He'll be the quarterback there. They brought in Andy Dalton as well. Kamara, still an electric player. Michael Thomas, they went with Olave in the draft. They brought in Jarvis Landry. They still have Taysom Hill as a weapon. Is this offense one to watch?
Yeah, I mean, they showed a lot of surprising faith, I guess, in Jameis Winston to really kind of carry the torch here coming off the injury and year two of replacing Drew Brees. Because, Mike, when they traded with the Eagles to give up a first-round pick next year, I think a lot of people, myself included, thought you don't make that kind of move unless you got your eyes on a quarterback. But they didn't. They just had their eyes on picking two players for their offense in the first round, one being Chris Olave, the other being Trevor Penning, the offensive lineman. So you look, and they have a good offensive line. You just mentioned the weaponry that they've got with Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, Olave added to the mix, and, of course, Alvin Kamara. The big questions are, does Mike Thomas come back from his, quite a while from injury at the same? Does he have the same kind of rapport with Jameis Winston that he did with Drew Brees? And, of course, what's going to become of Alvin Kamara, who was the fight in Las Vegas that he was involved with there? Is there going to be a long-term suspension or punishment from the league handed down to him? Because obviously he's one of the best weapons in the league, and he's a hard guy to replace if he's not on the field for them. I remember when Brian Westbrook would get hurt and they would bring in Corral Buckhalter, and Buck would have good games, but they had to run a different type of offense, Andy Reid did, because of the different skill sets between what Brian Westbrook did and what Corral Buckhalter did. And obviously that'll be Pete Carmichael, the offensive coordinator's job here, to figure out if he's without Kamara for a while.
Yeah, that offense should be interesting. We know Eagle fans are watching what's going on with the Saints. A lot of fans are just writing them off, but if you just got to look at it, they got a lot of interesting weapons on the offense. Their defense, Cam Jordan, Marcus Davenport, Demario Davis, Lattimore, Tyrann Mathieu, they signed him as well. So this defense is filled with some names. How are they going to be?
Yeah, I like this defense. Now, again, as we talk about injury question marks, you've got Marcus May coming off a big one with the Jets. We'll see how he is, because they lost Marcus Williams and then they went for the 2-for-1 deal. We lost Marcus Williams. We'll try to sign Marcus May here on a sort of bargain deal because he's coming off an injury. And then they went out and spent the money on Tyrann Mathieu. Again, kind of a going for it move for a team that I don't know if people saw last year as just a few players away from being a Super Bowl. They missed the playoffs, but I think they won 9 games, right? They were 9-8.
9-8, yep.
Either that, yeah, 9-8. And they felt like their offensive line, their defensive line, and these additions they make will probably, they feel like it'll help them compete in the division. I do think they're a very talented team. I always say, when you're strong in the O-line and D-line, you're going to be in games, and then it's up to your quarterback play and your coaching. And obviously those will be 2 question marks for the Saints going forward without Breeze and for year 2, and of course with Dennis Allen as the head coach now.
Yep, new head coach there. Sean Payton's out. Dennis Allen is in. The Saints 9-8. There's a look at them. Tampa Bay won the division. New Orleans second, and then after that, you had 2 teams that really struggled along. Atlanta had a new coach last year, and now they got a new quarterback. Matt Ryan is out. And it looks like Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder are going to be fighting for that spot there. We would imagine Mariota, from his time with Art Smith in Tennessee, would be the favorite there. Cordell Patterson, who has kind of morphed himself into a running back. They've lost a lot of those mainstay wideouts that they had for years. Julio Jones, we know has gone. Calvin Ridley suspended. So we talked about weapons for Tampa and New Orleans. Not a lot of weapons at wide receiver here. They do have Kyle Pitts. Their offensive line has been a problem. This team looks like it could have a long season.
Man, I couldn't agree with you more. And not only that, I mean, they were obviously already headed for a long rebuild. And then you get, Matt Ryan, you trade him away, and you start to even wonder about how the pieces fit here. Like Marcus Mariota they bring in, who is an athletic quarterback, has a decent, or not the strongest arm, and to my knowledge, not a guy, even going back to Oregon or in his first few years with Tennessee, was a guy who kind of threw the ball for his receivers to go get, right? He was more of a rhythm, in stride, kind of timing quarterback with his receivers at Oregon and what they wanted him to be at Tennessee, and he never really was. So they go out and draft Drake London, who is not a separator, not a timing guy. He's a throw it up and go get it guy. They've got Kyle Pitts, who had an amazing rookie year. Again, also a guy who can kind of go out and get it. And you're putting that with Marcus Mariota. And I'm not sure that makes a whole lot of sense. But I'll tell you this, that when we did the pre-draft process, me and Adam Kaplan, as we do every year for Inside the Birds, I talked to a lot of scouts, NFL personnel people, who really liked Desmond Ridder and felt he checked off so many of the important boxes as far as what's between the ears, the leadership, the command of the huddle, the knowledge of the offense, the intellect. He's got everything, and he's got a great athleticism and a strong arm. There was just an erratic, inconsistent film of him that they felt like if you could just get him with the right people and fine-tune it, he could be a good NFL quarterback. I don't know if they felt that in year one, but it's hard for me to think that this team isn't going to, at some point, turn to Desmond Ridder, because I just don't see them winning a whole lot of games early on.
I would agree. Mariota, who was the second pick of the draft, he's really hasn't lived up to the hype in terms of what people thought he might be. They did win some games in Tennessee. Him and Art Smith have a familiarity, but they don't have a lot there. And then defense. This is a team. You look up and down the line defensively here, you're looking at, all right, who's the standout guy on this defense? Well, Grady Jarrett, he's a veteran, but other than that, there's not a lot of names that really jump off the page. Who are some guys on this Atlanta defense? And, again, it looks like a defense that will struggle this year.
Yeah, I'm a big Grady Jarrett fan, actually. I've done a lot of tape study on Grady Jarrett, did some for when I was going through the scouting academy, and I think he's – as a defensive tackle, when you're the only really standout player on a front line, it's hard for you to just showcase what you got every single week. You can get double teamed, and it's hard. If you don't have great pass rushers around you, who are you creating for? And you kind of look at their front seven, and you see like Lorenzo Carter, Eddie Goldman. They drafted Arnold Ebiketie from Penn State in the first round. He's a good pass rusher. He's just a little bit raw. Like, I just don't see a whole lot in this front seven that's going to help complement what Grady Jarrett brings to the table.
Right.
And so I don't see this being a really, outstanding defense. I will tell you, AJ Terrell had a really nice year last year. He was their first round pick from, was he Virginia Tech, AJ Terrell? I forget where he went, but he had a really nice year. Casey Hayward, Richie Grant are guys in the secondary who they expect to play well, although Casey Hayward's getting up there. But again, just not a whole lot of all around. They did draft the Montana State guy, Troy Anderson. He's going to be fun to watch. He's probably going to make some mistakes. I don't know if you know the story about this guy. Used to be a quarterback, an option quarterback, and they turned him into a linebacker at Montana State. But every once in a while, Mike, they'd snap the ball to him on offense, and he would run the ball. I mean, he's a tremendous athlete, and he'll be fun to watch. But they're far away. Yeah. They're really far away. In fact, Mike, real quick, I'm wondering if they thought, by drafting Drake London, adding that to Kyle Pitts, and knowing that they're going to be pretty – I think they have an extra first-round pick from a trade. I have to go back and look. But I wonder if they're thinking with Calvin Ridley going to come back after this year, the next year, that if they draft a quarterback high in the draft next year and you pair that with Drake London in year 2, Calvin Ridley coming back, Kyle Pitts year 3, and then what they expect from Arthur Smith as an offensive mind – I wonder if they just have their eyes on 2023 and being fairly competitive that year with Brady maybe out of the division by then.
By the way, Terrell went to Clemson, not Virginia Tech.
I'm sorry. You're right. Clemson. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So an Atlanta team, as we saw last year, the Eagles opened up and lumped them up in the opener. And, they're a team that's really struggling right now. And then there's Carolina, who finished 4th last year at 5-12. They actually got off to a decent start last year, and then McCaffrey got hurt. But let's start with what happened yesterday. Baker Mayfield traded here. They got Darnold, Corral, P.J. Walker, and Baker Mayfield. This is going to be a really interesting – I would imagine Mayfield is the starter there. But I find this to be really interesting, Moshe. You only have 3 preseason games. Do you want any of those guys playing in the preseason, right? Do they each get a quarter of one game? Do they each get one full game? Like, how do they figure out who their guy is? I feel like this trade. So first, walk us through the trade and what you thought Carolina had to give up to get Baker Mayfield, and then kind of handicap that position on how you see it working out.
I mean, from a value standpoint, it's great for the Panthers. What, they give up a 5th-round pick, and they got Cleveland to foot half the bill on it or something like that. And Mayfield himself took a pay cut, which is sort of surprising and not great precedent. I would think that the NFLPA is happy about. But to answer your question, I would think that they would love it if Sam Darnold not only played in the preseason, but lit it up and looked really good, and then therefore maybe becomes a little bit of a trade chip for a team that maybe gets a quarterback injury in the preseason. We've seen that before, because otherwise it just feels like, I don't know. I don't want to call it a wasted talent, because Sam Darnold is not necessarily proven himself to be a top 20 or 25 quarterback, but I've seen Sam Darnold play well when you protect him. And they did the first 3 games. And they did draft Ike Ekwonu at left tackle. They can move Moton back to right tackle. He's a good right tackle. They've got weapons. Robbie Anderson's a good receiver. Obviously, DJ Moore is a very good receiver. Terrace Marshall is their slot receiver. I thought Tommy Tremble came on as a tight end for them last year. So, and of course, if Christian McCaffrey stays healthy, the offense revolves around him. So it's not a bad situation for either Darnold or Mayfield, as long as they're healthy. And honestly, Mike, that defense has a chance to be very, very good. They stole Matt Ioannidis, who the Washington had to release. He's a good lineman. Mm-hmm. Brian Burns, good player. Derek Brown, good player. Shaq Thompson, good player. And, of course, they're going to get the J.C. Horn back, who was playing really well until he got hurt. So if they can just get a decent quarterback play, I think they can be a decent team, but they're almost so reliant on a Christian McCaffrey or on their quarterback not being scattershot that they can also be a team that implodes really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, they were, they got off they were 3-0 at one point last year, and they were in that game against Dallas. They were in the game against Philly. You remember Darnold threw that interception. They were in the game against Minnesota. I mean, so they lost 3 in a row, but they were right there. They could have easily been 6-1 or 6-0 or 5-1. They lost a game. A lot of close games. They lost a close game to Washington late in the year. They lost a close game to Atlanta late in the year. They lost a close game to New Orleans late in the year. So you're right. If they can get some quarterback play, because they do have some weapons. McCaffrey, when he got hurt, that's when this thing kind of fell apart there. So there are weapons there for Baker Mayfield. And you mentioned the defense. Burns, very good. Shaq Thompson, they've got some definitely difference makers. And then somebody else.
Chin. I forgot to mention Jeremy Chin.
Jeremy Chin, and then J.C. Horn. Horn got hurt last year, and that was one of the problems they had too. So they've had a lot of injuries, but this is a team that could be interesting. The question is, Moshe, is Baker Mayfield, if he's healthy, is he that big of a difference maker for them?
Man, I just don't see it, Mike. I really don't. And I think it doesn't help that Ben McAdoo is their new offensive coordinator. Matt Rule is clearly on the hot seat. It seems like, I know the owner just was in the news for something not good, not paying for something that it just feels like this team is battling itself, battling its own lack of depth, and too reliant on a lot of things to go the right way. There's talent there. The defense will keep them in games. And if everybody stays healthy and they can kind of keep everything focused, they got a shot. But it just seems like it's going to be very difficult for everything to go right for this team and for the quarterback there.
All right, there you go. So Baker Mayfield, he's traded there. That's the Carolina story. Really, the big story for them. Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Atlanta, Carolina, the NFC South. Geoff Mosher, let me know if you think there's any changes to these standings. You think we got a mix-up this year? How do you see the NFC South rolling this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tampa Bay is clearly the team to beat again, and that's because Tom Brady came back, and they have enough with Brady back to win this division. They should win the division. If Brady were to get hurt and miss a lot of time, then it opens it up a little bit. But so to me, the second best team by far would be New Orleans. I think Carolina can challenge New Orleans to be the second best team if, again, everything goes the right way. But to me, you've got Tampa Bay, you got New Orleans, and then the other, obviously Carolina will scrap, and Atlanta is going to have what I think is going to be another difficult year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So Atlanta coming in last again. They actually were 7-10 last year, which is surprising to see after the way Philadelphia handled them. And you're thinking to yourself, well, they did have Matt Ryan, I guess, but the quarterback spot there. All right, that's the NFC South. Tampa Bay. You like Tampa Bay? One more time. What was that? Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Carolina, Atlanta.
So just the last two flipping there. All right, there's our preview of the NFC South, which means we've only got 2 divisions left to go, and that means we're getting ultra close to the start of training camp. Andrew will be back next week. We'll look at the North, and then the following week we'll preview the East, and that will mean the start of Eagles training camp here for Football 4. Moshe, we almost made it through the summer.
Almost did it, my friend. Almost.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds. The new podcast dropped this morning. Check that out, InsideTheBirds.com. And then Monday morning at 6, you can get the latest edition of Inside the Birds. And Moshe will be here tomorrow. We'll talk some more Eagles and NFL here on Football at 4. All right, Moshe, appreciate it, bud. Good pinch hitter.
You got it, Mike. Take care.
You're a lot better than Mickey Moniak in that role, I can tell you that much.
Call me Matt Stairs.
Into the night. All right, Moshe, take care. Geoff Mosher, InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. There's Football at 4. That division, very interesting. I agree. I think it's going to be Tampa Bay, New Orleans, Carolina, Atlanta. I think definitely pulls up the rear there. All right, Josh's headlines are coming up on the other side here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.